everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're all about helping you guys really grasp some fascinating topics, not just skimming the surface, but really getting in deep and making that knowledge stick.
Absolutely. Time is precious, right? So we're here to make sure you're spending it wisely, getting a clear, insightful understanding of those essential concepts.
So today we're diving headfirst into a concept that's basically, well, it's the foundation of how our bodies work. It's homeostasis. And trust me, if you're into anatomy and physiology, or maybe even thinking about a healthcare career, this is a term that's going to be your constant companion. We got some awesome resources to guide us. We'll be looking at Doherty and Foudy. Their work's all about the anatomy and physiology of homeostasis. And we've also got Leontino and Duval. They're coming at it from a pathophysiology angle, so how disease throws a wrench to normal body functions.
Exactly. And our mission today is to build like a rock-solid understanding of homeostasis. We want to move beyond just the definition and really see how it orchestrates the symphony of all our body systems working together, grasping the why. That's the key, whether you're prepping for exams or aiming to be the best healthcare provider you can be.
Okay, so let's cut to the chase. Why is understanding homeostasis so crucial, especially for anyone dealing with anatomy, physiology, or healthcare?
Okay, well, think of it this way. Homeostasis is the invisible conductor, the underlying reason why our body systems are constantly humming along, doing their thing. Like Doherty and Foudy put it, it's a dynamic process, always working to keep a stable internal environment, no matter what kind of chaos is happening inside or outside of us. So not just a static balance, more like a tightrope walker, constantly making tiny adjustments to stay upright.
Catch us. So it's a constant balancing act, but with tons of moving parts.
Precisely. And Doherty and Foudy really break down how vital this balancing act is for keeping our internal fluids in a state that can actually support life. I mean, we're talking about maintaining specific concentrations of, well, everything: oxygen, carbon dioxide, pH levels, the right amount of nutrients, getting rid of waste products. Then there's electrolytes. That whole balancing act is called osmoregulation, by the way. And don't forget crucial factors like fluid volume and pressure, body temperature, and even blood sugar levels.
Wow, that's a seriously long list. It's obvious that if any of those things go haywire, we're talking major trouble.
Oh, absolutely. These aren't just random numbers. They directly affect the chemical reactions happening at a cellular level, the ones that literally keep us going. And Doherty and Foudy, they bring up Tortora and Anagnostico's work, which shows that messing with this delicate homeostatic balance can have some seriously dire consequences. I mean, we're talking organ failure, even death. This is why really getting homeostasis isn't just academic. It's a matter of life and death, especially for anyone in healthcare.
Right.
If you don't know what normal, stable looks like, how can you possibly spot and fix what's gone wrong when someone's sick?
Totally. Makes sense. You need to understand the baseline to see when things are going off the rails.
Exactly. And that's where Leontino and Duval come in. They really emphasize how understanding those messed up homeostatic mechanisms is the key to bridging the gap between health and disease, from a pathophysiology perspective. It's about seeing how those deviations from normal actually manifest, those signs and symptoms we see in illness.
So we've established that homeostasis is this always-on process, keeps us functioning, but how does our body actually manage to pull this off? It's not like we're consciously controlling all these different variables.
Right. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? Homeostasis is a non-stop, dynamic process. Both Doherty and Foudy and Leontino and Duval are really clear about that. It's not a fixed state, but a constant dance of adjustments and monitoring. And our bodies are masters at using what we call feedback systems to achieve this. Leontino and Duval really highlight these systems, how they're crucial for picking up any changes in the internal environment and kicking off those necessary responses to get things back on track.
Feedback systems. That sounds kind of like a self-regulating machine. How do those work within something as complex as the human body?
That's not a bad analogy. We've got two main types: negative feedback and positive feedback. Negative feedback, that's the workhorse of homeostasis, like cruise control in a car. Speed goes above the set point. System kicks in to ease off the gas, brings it back down. In our bodies, let's say blood calcium levels go too high or dip too low, special receptors notice that change, and bam, mechanisms are activated to counter that shift and bring it back into that sweet spot. Doherty and Foudy give a classic example with parathyroid hormone managing blood calcium. If calcium levels drop, the parathyroid glands release more hormone, which then acts to increase calcium release from bones, ultimately raising blood calcium back to where it should be. What's so cool about negative feedback is it's self-correcting, built for stability.
So it's all about resisting the initial change. What about positive feedback? Doesn't that sound like it could easily spiral out of control?
Yeah, you're picking up on something important. Positive feedback actually amplifies the initial change instead of reversing it. It's less common for day-to-day homeostasis, and Doherty and Foudy point out it doesn't really lead to a stable state in the long run. But it's essential for specific situations where you need a rapid, quick burst of activity to get something done. The perfect example, and both Doherty and Foudy and Leontino and Duval mention this, is childbirth. The hormone oxytocin stimulates those uterine contractions, and the contractions themselves trigger even more oxytocin release, making the contractions stronger and stronger until, well, the baby arrives. So positive feedback is more about reaching a specific endpoint, not for continuous ongoing regulation.
That makes a lot of sense. Negative feedback for keeping things steady, positive feedback for those specific one-time events. Now, what are the actual pieces that make up these homeostatic feedback loops?
Well, Doherty and Foudy lay out three essential components: the receptor, the control center, and the effector. The receptor is the lookout. It detects the change, realizes something's off in the internal environment. Then you've got the control center. It gets the message from the receptor, analyzes it, and decides on the appropriate action.
Wow.
Finally, the effector, that's the muscle, gland, or tissue that actually carries out the orders from the control center to bring everything back to normal.
Okay, so how about a concrete example to make those parts click?
Sure, Doherty and Foudy use blood pressure regulation. We've got these specialized receptors, baroreceptors, hanging out in the walls of certain arteries. They're super sensitive to blood pressure changes. Let's say blood pressure shoots up. These baroreceptors send a signal to the control center, which in this case is a part of the brainstem called the medulla oblongata. And get this, the medulla oblongata, it's down there at the base of the brain, and it's involved in so many vital functions, not just blood pressure. Shows how important it is for keeping us stable. Anyway, the medulla oblongata gets the message and tells the effectors, the heart and blood vessels in this case, to chill out, slow down the heart rate, widen those blood vessels, vasodilation it's called, and bring that blood pressure back down.
So I see how these different parts work together, like a well-coordinated team. Now, what are the big players, the systems in our body that act as these control centers coordinating all these responses?
The real MVPs here are the endocrine system and the central nervous system. Both Torquora and Anagnostakos and Leontino and Duval, they highlight these two systems as the master regulators of our internal balance.
How do they each contribute to the whole homeostasis game?
Well, the endocrine system, Doherty and Foudy explain this really well. It uses hormones. They're like chemical messengers made and released by glands, and they regulate tons of bodily functions. These hormones travel through the blood and act on specific target cells that have the right receptors. It's super important. But the endocrine system tends to be a bit slower. Its response is more indirect compared to the nervous system. The nervous system, though, man, it's lightning fast. Both sources emphasize this. It picks up on any deviations from normal and sends out those super fast signals, nerve impulses, or action potentials to counteract those disturbances. And this often means directly acting on target cells, especially through the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, and a key part of the brain called the hypothalamus. Leontino and Duval go into that in detail.
Hold on, the autonomic nervous system, that's the part that works without us even thinking about it, right?
You got it. And Leontino and Duval give a quick rundown of the two main branches of the ANS, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous systems. Sympathetic, that's our fight or flight mode, gears us up for action and stress. Parasympathetic is more about rest and digest, conserving energy, keeping those basic functions ticking along. They're always working, often in opposition, to keep us in balance behind the scenes.
It's amazing how much is happening without us even realizing it. Now, how about some real-world examples? Let's talk blood sugar, something a lot of people are familiar with, especially with diabetes being so prevalent. How does homeostasis keep our blood glucose in check?
Blood sugar control is the perfect example of the endocrine and nervous systems teaming up. Both Tortora and Anagnostakos, cited by Doherty and Foudy and Leontino and Duval, they highlight this. The stars of the show are insulin and glucagon, hormones made by the pancreas. After a meal, blood sugar levels rise, and beta cells in the pancreas release insulin. Insulin's job is to get that glucose out of the blood and into cells for energy, and it also helps store excess glucose as glycogen in the liver and muscles. Basically, it brings blood sugar back down to normal. And understanding this dance between insulin and glucose, it's not just textbook stuff. It's crucial for grasping how diabetes meds target these hormones and how even small changes in these feedback loops can lead to different types of diabetes.
So insulin lowers blood sugar. What happens when it dips too low?
Glucagon to the rescue. When blood glucose falls, different cells in the pancreas, alpha cells, release glucagon. Glucagon tells the liver, hey, break down that stored glycogen back into glucose and release it. Blood sugar, back up we go. Leontino and Duvall even have a great diagram showing these opposing negative feedback loops in action. And they make it clear that messing with blood glucose regulation can lead to serious health problems, like type 2 diabetes.
A delicate dance between those two hormones, for sure. Okay, let's switch gears to breathing. How does that tie into homeostasis?
Breathing is key for keeping that oxygen and carbon dioxide balance in check, both in our fluids and our blood pH. The nervous system's in charge here. Doherty and Foudy reference Tortora and Agnosticos on this. At rest, our breathing rate and depth are set to keep these levels stable. But let's say we start exercising. Muscles need more oxygen, produce more carbon dioxide. Specialized nerve cells sense that and send a message to the cardiorespiratory center and the medulla oblongata. Remember that control center from the blood pressure example.
Wait, so it handles breathing and blood pressure? It's clearly the multitasker of the brain.
Exactly. So the brain tells the heart to pump faster, and the respiratory muscles, like the diaphragm and intercostal muscles, to step up their game, breathe faster and deeper. Doherty and Foudy, they explain how this ensures we get enough oxygen to our hard-working muscles and remove all that extra carbon dioxide, preventing acid buildup and maintaining a stable blood pH. They cite Doherty's work on that.
Makes perfect sense. You breathe faster when you're working out. Our bodies are amazing at these adjustments. Now, what about body temperature? Keeping that within a narrow range seems super important.
Absolutely. Temperature regulation is critical. Leontino and Duvall really stress that. Enzymes, those workhorses of our cells, are super picky about temperature. Too hot or too cold, they can denature, basically fall apart, and stop working. Our internal thermostat is the hypothalamus up in the brain. It gets info from thermoreceptors in our skin and blood vessels. Charkoudian et al. Did some great work on this, cited by Leontino and Duvall. If our body temp climbs too high, the hypothalamus triggers sweating and vasodilation, where blood vessels near the skin widen, helping us lose heat. If we get too cold, the hypothalamus initiates shivering, those rapid muscle contractions that generate heat, and vasoconstriction, where blood vessels near the skin narrow, conserving heat. Omerman's work, referenced by Leontino and Duvall, goes into that.
So sweating and shivering, they're both part of the plan to keep our core temperature stable. Amazing. Lastly, let's talk pH balance. That always seems like a delicate aspect of our internal environment.
Maintaining the right pH balance, or acid-base balance, is essential for countless processes in our body. Even how well our blood carries oxygen, Ammerman highlights this in Leontino and Duvall's work. Our blood pH has to stay within a very narrow range, 7.36 to 7.44. If it drops too low, that's acidosis. Too high, it's alkalosis. Both can be serious, even life-threatening, as Ham et al. Discuss in Leontino and Duvall's work. To keep things balanced, our bodies have some serious tricks up their sleeve. Chemical buffers, like the bicarbonate buffer system in our blood, act fast, instantly grabbing any excess acid or base. Our respiratory system also plays a part, adjusting carbon dioxide levels, which directly affects pH. And the urinary system, especially the kidneys, they're the long-term regulators, fine-tuning pH by selectively excreting or reabsorbing hydrogen ions, the acidic guys, and bicarbonate ions, the basic ones. Immerman explains this in Leontino and Duvall's paper. Kidneys are amazing at keeping our blood pH just right over time.
So it's a multi-layered defense system for pH.
Absolutely. And it really showcases how intricate and interconnected our systems are, all working together nonstop to maintain that internal stability. That's homeostasis.
This deep dive into homeostasis has been eye-opening. It's clear this isn't just some abstract concept, it's the foundation of our health and survival.
Couldn't agree more. The key takeaway here is that homeostasis is essential, dynamic, always working. Understanding how it works, the feedback loops, the roles of the nervous and endocrine systems, it's not just helpful, it's fundamental for anyone in anatomy and physiology or healthcare.
It really makes you appreciate how much our bodies are doing behind the scenes to keep everything balanced. And it makes you think, like Leontino and Duvall mentioned, how our modern lifestyles might be messing with this balance. Think chronic stress, processed foods, environmental toxins. Are these things putting a strain on our body's ability to maintain homeostasis? And what can we do to support this essential process? Definitely food for thought.
Absolutely. And this understanding of homeostasis is a perfect springboard to exploring what happens when these finely tuned systems go haywire in disease. In future deep dives, we could definitely explore specific examples of those imbalances and their clinical implications. It's a fascinating world, human physiology and pathology.
Sounds like a great plan for the future. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into homeostasis. We hope you've gained a much clearer understanding of this vital process. Until next time, keep exploring the incredible world around and within you.